Hello, my friends. Welcome to part 9 of my 12-part video series on Eastern hunter-gatherers from Sidelkino village in Samarskaya Oblast of Central Russia. This village has been inhabited by humans since until the Mesolithic period, and we are going to go and explore the DNA results of a Mesolithic period inhabitant of this village in Samarskaya Oblast of Central Russia. Now, Eastern hunter-gatherers are a very fascinating group of humans who inhabited Russia and Eastern Europe in the Mesolithic period. So, this particular individual lived 85 centuries before the Common Era, which means 105 centuries before present, a long time ago. That is more than 10 millennia ago, a very long time ago. This is early Mesolithic period, and this individual can be modeled as a mixture of 58% of Ontava-Garatri, so 58% ancient North Eurasian, 39% Western hunter-gatherer, and 3% Caucasian hunter-gatherer. So there is a little bit of Caucasus hunter-gatherer admixture present in this sample as well. A little bit less than some of the other samples I've covered, but this admixture is also present. This individual is female, so she does not have a paternal lineage, no Y DNA, but she does have a mitochondrial haplogroup, and her mitochondrial haplogroup is U4A1. Very typical, very common mitochondrial lineage for European hunter-gatherers. Most likely, this mitochondrial lineage she acquired from the Western hunter-gatherers or from the Gravettians who inhabited Europe previously. Now, let's go ahead and explore what she scores with Nashakot and her phenotype, what she looked like. So for the phenotype, it looks like she has brown eye color at 62% likelihood. Hazel eyes are also quite possible at 35% likelihood. She most likely does not have dark brown eyes, which is really interesting to see. She definitely doesn't have blue eyes or blue eyes with an amber center or green eyes. So this is completely out of the possibility. So pretty much the only eye colors that are possible for her are brown or hazel. Most likely she has brown or hazel eyes. That's what we can determine from this result. For hair color, she most likely has dark brown hair at 93% likelihood. It is also possible for her to have black hair at 6% likelihood, and every other hair color is pretty much completely out of the picture. So light brown or any shade of blonde or red hair is completely out of the picture. So she most likely has dark brown hair and brown eyes and olive or Mediterranean skin tone. So, what kind of complexion comes to mind when you imagine somebody who looks like this? Comes to mind maybe Spanish or maybe Italian or Greek, some kind of Mediterranean complexion. For hair texture, it looks like she has wavy hair. Okay. Definitely does not have kinky hair. That is only 0.4% likelihood of that. So, very decisively, my tool was able to determine she does not have kinky hair. For nose shape, she's scoring intermediate nose shape. So, intermediate between Greek and snub shaped nose. Very interesting. And for coloring related variants, because she does not have any light color variants here, we already know that with snipper free she would score brown eyes. She does not have BH3 or BH2 or BH1, so because of that, of course, snipper free once again would predict her to have brown eyes. YSEC would also predict her to have brown eyes, but she is still not scoring. She's still not scoring dark brown eyes with my tool. She's still got 35% odds of hazel eyes even with my tool. So there is quite a lot of light color variants that she has that contribute to her scoring this kind of a result. Let's determine what those are, because I'm very curious to find out what light color variants those are that contribute to her result. So she does have two light color variants in this variation, SLC 45A24A5. So light pigmentation of skin, very, very interesting. Also, two light color variants in all the relevant variations of SLC 45A2. So also light pigmentation of skin, eyes, and hair, very, very interesting once again, very European genotype to have. And she also has two light color variants in this variation of IRF4, which is very big. This also has a big contribution to eye color as well. So this is very revealing. This is a very big contribution to scoring lighter for the pigmentation of eyes with my tool. So this definitely is very revealing, and it's a very hunter-gatherer kind of a genotype as well, because I noticed that a lot of these early European hunter-gatherers have derived variants in this variation, whereas among the modern Europeans, it's not very common to see light color variants in this particular variation, aside from some ethnicities such as Irish or Komi people in Russia. It's very interesting how there's such isolated groups of Europeans, such as Irish and Komi in Russia, who have um, retained, you could say, these light color variants in this particular variation. But I don't have the data. I don't have the data on it right now because Alfred is down currently. The servers for Alfred allele frequency database are down. I don't know when they will fix it and get it back up and running. Hopefully soon, so that you could look this up and get this information and yeah, hopefully they will fix it sooner. She does not have any light color variants in this variation of Kito G, so no blonde Kito G variation. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really play a big role, but it's whatever. It's just interesting to check. And no light color variants in these variations of MC1R, so she's not predisposed to ginger hair whatsoever. Okay, so let's close that and see what she scores for the phenotype oracle. And the closest phenotypes to her with the phenotype oracle, it looks like are so the closest phenotype looks like is this, which is kind of Tatar or maybe Turkic. The second closest phenotype is this, which is, you could say, French or South or Western European. And the third closest phenotype is this, which you could say also is Southern European or Western European phenotype. All right. And for the mixtures of phenotypes, she is getting modeled as a mixture of, well, everything you would expect, right? So somebody it looks like she has a rather Western facial morphology. She doesn't really have this Eastern, like Eastern facial traits. I'm not expecting to see, because this is the first time I'm looking at this result. I did not look at this beforehand, so I'm not expecting to see. I only looked at the pigmentation stuff beforehand. I did not look at the morphology and everything like that. So I'm not expecting to see any EDAR, any East Asian EDAR variants here. She's scoring, once again, West Eurasian phenotype plus another West Eurasian phenotype for the closest mixture. Then this kind of Middle Eastern looking phenotype plus this North Indian looking phenotype for the second closest mixture. Then once again, this North Indian with light pigmentation plus, I guess, Central Asian phenotype for the third closest. Maybe there is some East Asian EDAR variants. I don't know. Actually, I don't know. Maybe there are some. Let's check. So it's very, very, very interesting phenotype admixture. Maybe there are some East Asian variants in EDAR. I'm not sure, because she is scoring some Central Asian groups. Like the closest mixture is a mixture of Central Asian with light pigmentation plus Central Asian with darker pigmentation. So maybe because she's scoring these Central Asian groups for the facial oracle, facial morphology oracle, because of that, maybe she does have some East Asian genotypes in the EDAR. And the closest group for the facial morphology oracle is actually partly Mongoloid as well. Oh, I said that word. I don't want to say it in YouTube, but I hope they're not gonna demonetize me because of it. Whatever. But so yeah, this might be because of partially East Asian genotype in the EDAR. Let's check that right now. Actually, let's go ahead and check that. Yes. Okay. So that's what we see here. We see European genotype here. We see European genotype here, but then we see no European alleles here. So likely not a European genotype in this variation of EDAR. So this makes sense. She does have one variation in EDAR where she's got a East Eurasian genotype. This makes sense. So because of that, she's got all these Central Asian groups in the oracle. Okay, that makes sense. All right, let's go ahead and see what she scores for the biomarkers panel. And for the biomarkers panel, she's scoring much higher odds for much higher levels of vitamin D, which is really good to see. So she's definitely got a predisposition to higher levels of vitamin D. Higher levels of LDL cholesterol, which is bad. Lower levels of HDL cholesterol, which is also bad. Higher levels of glucose, which is bad. Higher levels of hemoglobin, which is okay. Higher blood pressure, which is really bad. Actually, this is very dangerous. The blood pressure that she's scoring is very it's bordering on dangerous. So she definitely has some predisposition to very high blood pressure. She's got predisposition to lower level of iron in the blood, so she definitely doesn't have hemochromatosis variants. She's got predisposition to higher level of sex hormone binding globulin, higher red blood cell count, and lower telomere length. Okay, and also lower height. Pretty interesting. All right, let's go ahead and check what she scores for the polygenic risk scores. I'm gonna ignore everything that's average. So she's got high score for kidney stones, low score for hemoglobin E disease, low score for migraine, high score for thyroid cancer, low score for eczema. Looks like she's got some predisposition to polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS. Very interesting. Now PCOS it's a pretty gnarly disease, but it's pretty common as well. Um, so she might be a little bit predisposed to that, which is kind of interesting. She's also predisposed to cataracts. She's protected from AMD, which is very interesting to see. She's a little bit protected from rheumatoid arthritis as well. Um, she's slightly predisposed to epilepsy. She's predisposed to leukemia, which is very interesting. She's slightly predisposed to myopia, slightly predisposed to corneal astigmatism. She's slightly protected from stroke, which is very good to see. She's predisposed to male pattern hair loss, which is not surprising whatsoever because she's a West Eurasian, and West Eurasians tend to be predisposed to this condition. If you watched my videos for a long time, you already see a pattern of West Eurasians being predisposed to male pattern hair loss. She's got below average odds for atrial fibrillation, and she's got lower odds for unipolar depression, lower odds for bipolar type 1, and lower odds for schizophrenia. She's got very high odds for type 2 diabetes. Okay, so for type 2 diabetes, this is the highest thing she scored so far. So we have to keep that in mind. Type 2 diabetes is a big concern for her. And average odds for type 1 diabetes. She's got average for Alzheimer's, average for multiple sclerosis. All right, so we have to keep type 2 diabetes in mind when we think about this result. For cancer section, she's got 2 risk variants for breast cancer at 14. That's nothing. 11 risk variants for testicular cancer of 22, and she's got all the homozygous calls on keto G. So she's quite cooked when it comes to risk variants for testicular cancer. But also keep in mind she's a female; she does not have testicles, so we don't really have to worry about her risk variants for testicular cancer too much. So that's not that big of a deal, to be honest. PCOS is a much more concerning issue for her, much more pressing issue. She's got 1 risk variant for celiac disease out of 10, not that big of a deal. No risk variants for GSS. 10 risk variants for Crohn's out of 24, which is really big. That's really concerning. That's actually really concerning. Okay, that's really huge. That's very huge. So she might be predisposed to Crohn's disease actually, as well as type 2 diabetes. She's got no risk variants for Riefenstein's, no risk variants for Parkinson's. 1 common risk variant for Gilbert syndrome, which is typical. No risk variants for anything else. Allergies, she's got 10 out of 24, which is typical. No risk variants for anything else. Yep, I'm not seeing anything else. Myosclerosis, one risk variant here, and Fabry disease, 1 risk variant here. These are probably both miscalls, so this is not something I'm too much worried about. But I am worried about the score for type 2 diabetes. So let's go ahead and go through the result and see what we find here. So in regards to Warrior versus Warrior phenotype, she's scoring more intermediate. So intermediate dopamine levels and intermediate ability to tolerate stress. Intermediate activity of the COMT and MAOA enzymes, which is very different from the rest of the Eastern hunter-gatherers that I've observed so far. Out of all of the I think at this point it's been 9 samples I've looked at. This is the only sample who did not score Warrior, and that says a lot. So out of these the 9 samples I've looked at so far, this is the only sample who was not a Warrior. Kind of crazy. This sample also has less dopamine D2 receptor sites in the brain, so he's quite protected from such conditions as schizophrenia and bipolar, more predisposed to such conditions as I guess ADHD. And for 5-HT and serotonin. Looks like this individual has intermediate levels of 5-HT and serotonin, so intermediate predisposition to such conditions as um, I think it's anxiety. I think anxiety and depression. This individual is not a dwarf, doesn't have any dwarfism variants, and this individual has a very uncommon genotype that leads to 7 times increased risk of DSPS. What is DSPS? I forget. I think it's some kind of a sleep disorder. Okay, this individual has a higher odds of autism. This individual has a predisposition to higher odds of lactose intolerance, higher or intermediate odds of lactose intolerance. Out of these 8 SNPs, which means, four SNPs, 8 different alleles, this individual does not carry a single allele for lactose persistence. So pretty much 8 alleles and not a single allele for lactose persistence, and definitely very much predisposed to being lactose intolerant. But of course, there's a bunch of other variations that are not taken into consideration that also play a role in being lactose persistent. So despite a result like this, despite not having any variants for lactose persistence, my tool is still very tolerant of that. My tool is still very liberal and still gives like only a 50% odds for being lactose intolerant. So my tool actually does take that into consideration. Keep that in mind. For OXTR and empathy gene, this individual is scoring higher for the level of empathy based on these 5 SNPs. For diabetes, let's go ahead and look at that. So what contribute to her scoring so high for type 2 diabetes? There is a bunch of other variations that are not explicitly shown on the screen that contribute to the score. Keep that in mind. But we should be able to look at that here as well. So just based on this one genotype right here, we can probably say that the HLA gene panel is going to look pretty good. This genotype right here leads to lower odds of type 1 diabetes as well. Let's see this. There's another genotype here that leads to 7-fold decrease in risk of type 1 diabetes. Okay, pretty interesting. There's also a genotype. There's these 2 genotypes that lead to increase in the risk of type 2 diabetes, which is very interesting as well. But there's not that many genotypes for odds of type 2 diabetes here. Just very, very, very interesting. But there's a lot more that play a role in the risk score that don't show up on the screen. For hemochromatosis, looks like no risk variance for hemochromatosis. Very good, as I said previously. And for Alzheimer's, no risk variance in APOE. All right. For cardiovascular disease panel, I'm just going to look at this side of the screen. So it looks like she has a predisposition to intermediate odds of cardiovascular issues, which is really good. So intermediate or lower odds of cardiovascular issues, really, really good. For myopia panel, she does not have the G allele here, which would protect from myopia. I think she was scoring slightly higher for myopia. Let's go ahead and look that up as well in the polygenic risk score page. Let's look that up. Yes, she's scoring slightly higher for the odds of myopia. All right. Okay. For the facial morphology panel, she's got we already went over the ETAR genotype, but she's got intermediate odds of protruding nasal bridge. She's got larger nose size. She's got a genotype for thicker eyebrows and a genotype for slightly thinner eyebrows. She's got a genotype for nose pointing up and a genotype for slightly shorter mid-face length. Interesting. For vitiligo panel, she does have heterozygous genotype in both the variants for relevant variants for vitiligo in the HLA gene. So based on that, we can expect probably we can expect the HLA gene panel to have some predisposition to autoimmune disorders because of this. Some predisposition, but we do need to see the multiple sclerosis gene panel. But I don't expect to see any risk variance for multiple sclerosis in the HLA gene because I remember the risk score for that being pretty average. So I guess we'll find out in a couple seconds. Okay. She does not have micropenis, which is really good to see. She's got impaired muscle performance, likely endurance athlete. All right. And she's also not an Asian flusher. All right. Okay, we're gonna skip that. Actually, she's got lower odds of cannabis-induced psychosis. I'm not gonna skip that. That's a very European trait to have, so I'm not gonna skip that. She's also not a carrier of any of the albinism traits. She's got a genotype that leads to a 6 times increased risk of cleft lip. A cleft lip is when you have an opening in your palate and you end up having an opening in your lip as well. I'm not going to look that up. It might not be PG-13 for the YouTube, and YouTube might demonetize me. I don't want to deal with that. For familiar Mediterranean fever panel, she does not have any risk variance for that. For MTHFR, let's see. She does have a genotype that leads to impaired folate metabolism in MTHFR. But the other genotype in MTHFR is really good. So based on these two genotypes in MTHFR, I can probably expect the homocysteine panel to be pretty good as well. And her risk for alcoholism is below average, way below average. So based on that, we can definitely disregard the stereotype that we have established in the prior videos that Eastern hunter-gatherers have a predisposition to alcoholism, because at this point we see that this is not the first sample. This is already the second sample from Eastern hunter-gatherers who has a below average predisposition to alcoholism. Okay. For testicular cancer, it looks like she's got these two genotypes that are homozygous for increased risk, and this genotype that is heterozygous for increased risk. So once again, I actually missed that when I was talking about it on the polygenic risk score page, which is definitely very interesting. I should have talked about that, but it's whatever. So she does have one heterozygous genotype here. For leukemia, she was scoring above average for the risk of leukemia, and no NQ01 alleles, but she does have some risk variance here. Okay, and she has this genotype which leads to 4 times increased risk of acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which very, very interesting. For the rare diseases and traits panel, let's look at the rare diseases that she's predisposed to. Okay, so she's got genotype that leads to 10 times increased risk of glaucoma in some populations, carrier of risk allele for neural tube defects and spina bifida. No holoprosencephaly, pretty good. She's got a risk for increased odds for ankylosing spondylitis. She's got a risk for rheumatoid arthritis, and that's pretty much it. No, she's got a risk for eosinophilic esophagitis. That's pretty much it. For celiac disease risk, she does have a condition. She does have a genotype for increased risk of autoimmune disorder. 1 HLA-DRB, 1 risk allele. So once again, this might contribute to her scoring higher for the risk of autoimmune disorder on the HLA gene panel. I'm really curious to see what she scores for that, but we still haven't seen the multiple sclerosis gene panel. So let's get to that. Have we seen it yet? I might have skipped over it. Hold on. Yeah, so multiple sclerosis looks like she does not have any risk variance here, no risk variance here, no risk variance here. Okay, so for multiple sclerosis, she does not have any risk variance in the HLA gene. So looks like probably her HLA gene panel is going to look pretty good. It's probably going to look pretty good. Okay. Let's scroll past to androgen receptor gene, no Reifenstein syndrome, Crohn's disease, nothing found. Canavan syndrome, no risk variance for that. HIV and AIDS panel, one protective variant here, which leads to a 60% reduction in HIV viral load. So there is some protection from HIV, which is really good. And HLA gene panel looks like she's scoring lower odds of autoimmune disease. Pretty good. So despite all of these risk variants in the HLA, she is still scoring lower odds of autoimmune disease, although there is quite a lot of the percentage for highest odds for autoimmune disease and the percentage for slightly higher odds of autoimmune disease is actually pretty high. Like, for example, if you compare this with my result, I score only 1%, 1 point something percent for highest odds. She is scoring 11, so that's a big difference. She's still got very much elevated odds for highest odds for autoimmune disease. That's not to be disregarded. But nonetheless, she's still got pretty healthy result. There is still not much to worry about in regards to HLA gene. For the MTRR gene panel, she does not have any risk variance for that here. Actually, she does have. She has 2 risk variants for disorders in intracellular colby metabolism. Here, that's 2 out of how many? That's 2 out of 8, which is pretty good. For the CBS gene panel and homocystinuria, looks like she has a predisposition to intermediate or elevated homocysteine levels, but that is not because of MTHFR. That is mostly because of these 4 SNPs. She's got the genotype for highest levels of homocysteine levels. She's got the genotype which leads to highest, slightly increased homocysteine levels. The genotype which leads to intermediate or higher levels of homocysteine. So yes, she's got all the genotypes that lead to higher levels of homocysteine in the CBS gene panel, and because of that, because of these impacts, she's got a predisposition to elevated homocysteine levels, and also because she has a risk variance for homocystinuria as well. So this is not because of MTHFR. This is because of all of this, that she's scoring 33% for elevated homocysteine levels and 48% for intermediate homocysteine levels. But even all that taken into consideration, this is not a very terrible score. It's not even all that concerning. Okay. For muscular dystrophy myopathy, she's got 0 risk variance for that. Pretty good. For colorblindness panel, 2 risk variance for for colorblindness in OPN1 SW. So, but women cannot really be colorblind, so that's not that big of a concern. For FTO gene panel, she's got looks like lower or intermediate or higher odds of obesity. So she's quite predisposed to obesity actually, which is definitely very interesting. And yes, you see that she's homozygous for a lot of the fat gene variants in FTO. So she is predisposed to being overweight. Definitely very interesting. For syncope panel, and that actually goes together with the risk for type 2 diabetes. Very it goes hand in hand, being predisposed to being overweight and having a higher risk for type 2 diabetes. I feel like that those two conditions really overlap. They don't overlap in the calculation for the risk in my program, but in reality, when you have these two predispositions, uh, it can be pretty dangerous to have these two conditions overlapping in your life. For syncope panel, based on Forest and Peace, she has above average just for syncope. For biotraits panel, what can we talk about here? Let's find out. Okay. What can I talk about here? She's got 2 copies of the farmer CLT-CL1 gene variant, which leads to a selective advantage in processing carbohydrate-rich diets, presumably including those with lots of sugar. So it's very ironic that she, as a hunter-gatherer from the early Mesolithic, has a genotype that leads to selective advantages in processing carbohydrate-rich diets, and that is called the farmer CLT-CL1 gene variant, when she is as hunter-gatherer as it gets. And when it comes to her genotype for the blood group panel, it looks like she definitely has blood type O. The most common blood type for humans worldwide is blood type O, and that is the blood type that she has. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video until the very end. I hope you watched it, and I hope you were entertained by my rambling, by my coverage of this sample. Make sure you read the description of the video. There is a little portion in the description where it's AI generated information about Eastern hunter gatherers. I just leave that there so that my video can be found by Google search. And there's also the link to download the raw DNA file that I cover in this video. And there is also links to buy my trait predictor, which is the tool that I use to generate these reports. Very, very thorough, in-depth health and traits reports. You can generate these reports for yourself or for any sample you want. Also, you can buy a sample report for only $4 from me. The link to buy these sample reports will also be in the description of this video. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.